Great, and we're live. So welcome everybody to this remote interview. My name is Lisette and I'm interviewing people and companies doing great things remotely. And today on the line, all the way from Hamburg, Germany, I have Tobias Windbrake. Tobias, you are the director of the DACH region for iObeya, which is a digital visual management platform. Now we're going to get to that. But you're also the creator of a website called collaborationabc.com, going over all the different pieces of what team collaboration is. So I'm super excited to talk about this. But first, let's start with the first question, which is, what does your virtual office look like? What do you need to get your work done?
Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me. Yeah, how does my office look like? So to be honest, I'm not working from home. So during the course of my career, I had phases where I worked from home and I realized because I didn't have a separate room, it's not really working out well for me. So what I did is renting a co-working space with just two other groups in here. And so I'm working remotely with my company, and that's what I also did in the past with North American companies, but not from home most of the time. So just to let you know. I have two monitors attached to my laptop, so that's really was a big productivity boost when I get more than one, because you want to have different documents that you look at the same time, or you want to have the video feed and the actual document. So it really was a productivity boost to get actually a third monitor beside my laptop. I also have an external camera, and it's a pretty good Logitech camera. First of all, because you have a better angle. Sometimes the angle can be very unpleasant from your laptop, but also because it has a bit more a wider angle. So you can see your hands and you can see the gesturing, which is simply making it easier for other people to actually understand what you really mean if information is not clear to them immediately. I have this headset, so a bit bigger, a bit clunky, but it has noise cancellation in it. So if there should be people around here in the office and they're also having calls, then it's really beneficial to have noise cancellation. Actually also got Airpods recently that have these noise cancellation. And what I realized as a little technical detail, it works great on Mac and audio quality is really good. If you use it on a Windows PC, it's really, really crappy. So they know how to. Good tip. Yeah, a lot of people you see also in interviews, they have the white earplugs from Apple, and it's typically if they have really good audio quality, you can tell they're using it on a Mac. Also recently got maybe you know this little tool here.
No, he's holding up a Stream Deck. Oh, it looks like the Elgato lighting system.
Yeah, so it's from Elgato, so it's from the gaming industry, and what it does, it gives you additional hardware buttons. So you know this very common problem, maybe the problem number one in all remote teams, that people are on mute and don't unmute themselves because they're used to Teams, and then it's in a different spot on WebEx or in Google Meet. So here you have hardware buttons that you can completely program, and you can have different features like ending a call or muting yourself or unmuting yourself on this one. But you can even use it like a soundboard. So if you want to have applause or some other noises, the ringing of the door, so that you have a good excuse to end the call, you can put it on a button, up to things
Sold.
like
Sold.
You want to switch your background of your virtual background with the press of a button. That's all in this tool. So I haven't used it much yet. I really plan to use it in webinars, so to make it a bit more interesting and easier for the presenter to navigate through the tool set.
Oh, I love it because, you know, sometimes I'm experiencing a lot of hay fever right now because it's spring. So it comes with it. And I noticed that it takes me a little while to find the mute button, which is distracting for the person. Like if I have to cough or sneeze or do something hay fever related while I'm in a meeting or recording something, it's actually distracting for the person that I'm in the meeting with because they can see that I'm searching for something. My eye contact goes away, right? And it would be nice just to be able to push a button. I don't have to look away at all. So I love the idea of having this, you know, it's very practical and it's cool to have a new toy. on your desk. You can program. Especially you can do like, you know, how they do on the late shows with applause and funny sound effects. I love it.
Yeah. And you can even, so each of these buttons is a little display in itself. So you can even design your icon for this. So whatever you want. You can even use it as a quick dial for doing a Zoom call to your husband or something. So that's one thing. Talking about buttons, actually the headset that I have has a hardware pod itself, which also has a mute button for this headset here. So that's very handy as well.
Indeed. Oh, it sounds like it's like a hub of operations over there, like a couple of monitors, some good cameras.
Yeah, it's yeah, for the last 15 years or so, I'm always working remotely, where I'm the kind of satellite from the main office, which is either in North America or now in France. So I'm used to this.
Okay, so I've written that down as I want to talk to you about like how is it to be the satellite person working from another office as headquarters. We'll get to that, but I want to dive into this collaboration ABC because what I have here it's a curated collection of resources that people can use for personal study and discovery, and basically it's an easy list of principles and best practices for effective teamwork. And it's a lovely designed website, really simple and like easy to digest and understand. But let's start with, why did you build this?
Yeah, it's a good question. So it was very unconventional. So when I started my career, I was at a company that was selling visual collaboration solutions. And it was a combination of hardware, mainly around digital whiteboarding. And what was interesting to me is to see that sometimes if you put it into company A, they love it. And they said, well, it really helped us to collaborate better and we can quickly disseminate information. You don't have to take screenshots or photos of a flip chart anymore. You can simply send it by the press of a button, and they loved it. And they really didn't want to work without it anymore. And then you put the same technology into company B, and there's zero effect. So there's really not a benefit, and it's just collecting dust. So I was thinking, well, it's definitely a great solution for digital whiteboarding and some other use cases around it. But collaboration as a term is so much more. And it's such a big topic that has so many different aspects that I kind of became passionate about this topic as a hobby. So I started to read a lot of books and watched a lot of TED Talks and HBR articles and all these great resources to understand the big picture of collaboration. And I'm a big fan of the concept of essence. So my preferred analog tool is a highlighter. So I always try to highlight these parts of a book that really are the essence of the story. So there's always an introduction and some other stuff and an ending, summary, and then there's the essence. And I try to always capture the essence. And after a couple of years, I had a lot of books and resources and also a lot of information nuggets that I had floating around and that I try to cluster. And the more books you read, you see, well, there's a lot of overlap and a lot of common themes that emerge as a pattern. So I try to define these clusters, and I'm a very structured person with a computer science background. So I love to think in patterns and structures. And then at some point I had the impression, well, I have a good basic understanding of effective collaboration. But then the frustration was to say, well, in the end, collaboration is like a team sport. And every single team sport in the world has a set of rules, simple rules, but everyone follows these rules. Otherwise, you can't have a good game that you can enjoy, neither as a player nor as an observer. So why on earth don't we have a set of rules in quotation marks? It's more like principles and best practices that make effective collaboration. So that really is my hobby, or turned out into a passion. So the epiphany moment was when my daughter, she's 9 years old now, was going to the first grade and was practicing a lot of writing, so practicing the ABC, and they practice it over and over again. They have pages of A's and pages of B's, so that really gets engraved in a young child's brain. So maybe we can use this as the anchor for everyone. So it's more or less similar in most cultures, at least Western Europe and some other regions. So we have a pretty good coverage if you take the ABC, and then attach these clusters of best practices along the ABC. And as you can imagine, it took a lot of iterations to really come to attach these clusters to a distinct letter for each cluster. But after some time, I came to what we would now call MVP, so something where I think that's working out well, and also have a larger network on LinkedIn. So I got a lot of feedback and input from my LinkedIn network to make it better. And just recently, I said, okay, now let's put it out as an ABC. And what turns out, I think it's a really good list with not too much overlap in terms of the different clusters. But if you really want to learn how to do it, you sometimes need to go down to the next level. So go down to the resources. So what I did is put up this website, collaborationabc.com, where you have the ABC on the first page. And then if you click on like ask good questions, you find some resources, kind of the best resources that I think are applicable in terms of books or TED Talks or articles that are related to this. And I just hope that it's a useful resource for teams that want to either align on something as a kind of book of rules, but also I think it's a great resource for personal study if you really want to go down into the all the details and research behind effective teamwork. That was kind of the story.
I love it. And I love this whole idea of like collaboration as a team sport, thinking of it that way, or because it is, you can't collaborate alone. That's not really collaboration. It does take another person to do it. So I'm going to ask you what I think is a hard question, but maybe not. What are the components then of good collaboration, like the core components for what that means? And actually, let's take a step back, because we were talking before we started recording, and I had an aha moment in one of the last podcasts that I did with Carlos Valdez de Pena, and he was saying collaboration is not about the quiz nights and the fun stuff that people are doing. Like, it's fun. Like, it's good to have fun on a team, and it's great when you like each other, but that doesn't mean that you're going to collaborate well together. So there's first, I guess, I was going to say, let's start with what is collaboration, but I think we know collaboration is people working together towards a goal, right? That's what we're going to produce something, do something together. But maybe I would start with, how would you define collaboration? It's not such an easy question after all.
It is. I mean, that's a really a very important question in this context, and because there are other related concepts like coordination or communication. So what is really collaboration? And it's certainly a group of people that are working towards a shared goal, but there also needs to be some interdependency and also some kind of fuzziness in terms of either the process or the goal. So as an example, if you're working in a factory where you along a conveyor belt, you also work towards a common goal to build a car, and you have other people in the same room, even in the same hall, but you're not collaborating. It's a coordinated workflow. And it doesn't matter if the next station is a person or a robot or a card. It's really, it's not enough that you work towards a common goal, but you need to have interdependencies, like you get inspired by other people, or you complement one another with a cognitive skills. And it's often, if you take the factory example again, it's often when there's an issue, right? So the conveyor belt stops, and now we need the creativity of a human to solve this problem. That's where collaboration takes place. Or if you develop a new product, so where the end is not clear, where you need to ideate, then you need people to really think about and work together. Or if you want to optimize a process and you do things like value stream mapping, where you put together your knowledge, and then it's really a circular process where it's knowledge sharing, getting inspired one another, discussing ideas, improving. So that's a very human, very complex process, which I think it's collaboration. It's different to just coordinated work. So if you 100% know what the starting point is, what the process is, what the end result is, you don't need to collaborate. You just need to coordinate.
That is a really good point. Not everything is collaboration, and coordination is not such a bad thing necessarily.
No.
I mean, people like having great workflow systems in place so that you don't have to think about like, oh, do I need to go back and forth with somebody messaging, like having these workflows in place. It's really good. You want to coordinate a lot. And on some things, you want to be really distinctive about what you need to collaborate on. Indeed. I love that, the interdependency. I've learned something today. So
Great.
you're like, aha moment.
I mean,
So then,
maybe other question that you had before in terms of on a higher level. So 26 letters to go through is a lot, but the meta clusters that I identified is at the core is really the mindset and personal effectiveness. So as a main requirement, you need to believe in collaboration. If you believe that you are better in terms of your knowledge and skills than anyone else, and that if you're a person that loves to micromanage, it's really hard to collaborate effectively if you don't believe in the power of diversity and working together. So that's this mindset perspective. Second, in this first, I see this concentric circle. So in this inner circle is personal effectiveness. So you should do a good job in managing your own effectiveness and productivity and making sure that you keep commitments, because if you don't do this, it's very hard to provide value to a team, right? Because if other team members need you in terms to contribute or execute a task, they rely on you because sometimes you're the blocker for them to do the next step. So if you're not good at managing your own to-do list, it's very challenging in a team as well. So it's not what we typically think about first when we think about collaboration, but is a core, really this inner circle. The second circle in this concentric circles is communication and co-creation. So you need to be effective communicator with all the different aspects, being a good listener, asking questions, and then also having the tools and skills to co-create. For example, using sticky notes on a big wall to do a brainstorming, or 6 thinking heads, or all these different tools that we have these days and processes to co-create effectively. And then finally, the outer circle is the leadership, which is very important, which provides the proper tools, but it also is very important to shape and craft and nurture a company culture. So there are very different aspects. As you may know, in the past, Microsoft had something called stack ranking. So in the end, you put your employees into 2 different brackets, and the first one was your high performer, and then the mid performer, and then the low performer. And the kind of easy rule in a nutshell, so simplified, was you get rid of the low performers each year. So that sounds like a very good way of creating excellence at first.
Scary to me.
It is scary. I mean, it's the opposite of psychological safety, which is a big topic these days. So these days we know, based on lots of research, for example, by Google, that this is not going to work out in a VUCA world where you need every brain and flexibility and agility. But back then they thought it's a great idea. And what happens then is that you say, well, if I need to survive in the company and just whatever 2/3 of the company can survive, you're not sharing information, right? Because suddenly information is an asset that keeps you alive in the organization. So it's killing collaboration just by setting up the wrong structure and the wrong environment. So it's very important to think about the right incentives, the right structure, the right kind of hierarchies, if you believe you need hierarchies, to preferably keep it flat, because this has a profound impact on how well these teams can perform in the middle.
That's a really good example, actually, of just setting up the wrong performance system for the company. All of a sudden has a huge effect on collaboration organization wide, right? Like you can't help. I mean, as soon as you said how they had set people up into these 3 buckets, I immediately felt like I felt like I was withdrawing from something. And so indeed, when you said like, and people are less willing to share, I thought, yeah, indeed, you like are, it's like every man for himself at that point. Like that's sort of
Yeah.
the feeling that I got, like, okay, or every person for themselves, right? Like I'm in it, it's about surviving this next round. Like that's what it's about. So of course, not as cut and dry as that, but I definitely had that sort of physical reaction as you was talked about it. So that's awesome. So then to recap, the components are mindset and personal effectiveness at the core. And I
Yep.
do must say that you have to start with your own personal
It's
effectiveness.
communication and co-creation. So really the things that we typically relate to effective collaboration. And it's sometimes people equal it to just co-creation, but communication is always a big part of this. So I think that's very important. And then the outer circle is leadership and company culture.
So there are 26 different sort of categories in which to search for. I'm going to say I want to pick one. Is there one that like was something that really spoke to you personally, or should I pick one at random that we can talk about?
So I mean, there are some things that are very commonly known, like asking questions. By the way, there was an interesting point and a lot discussed in the community. So at first I just had ask questions, and then I put in ask good questions, and I got a lot of pushback to say, well, first we need to encourage people to ask questions. So every question is better than not asking a question, which is true. But I also wanted to kind of highlight that there are better questions, and if you ask better questions, you get better answers. So you should also, once you come to the stage that your team is daring to ask questions, that you also think about the quality of the questions and how to improve it. So as a compromise, I made my A in the alphabet ask good questions, while good are in brackets. So I said, well, that's kind of a compromise. First, yes, ask questions. A question is better than being in doubt and not daring to ask it. But there's also a lot of research and a lot of best practices on how to ask open questions, whether it's closed questions, but also very simple little frameworks, for example, from design thinking that I liked. For example, to give feedback. And one of these ways is threefold, three structure. What you like about it. So I like the fact that you're doing podcasts. I wish we could have more podcasts together. And what if you would do a podcast every second day? So I like, I wish in terms of improving this, and then what if in terms of giving an open question as an inspiration. Could we do this? Not to say you have to do it, but just this what if question. And what if alone is a very powerful tool. Two single words, very powerful, but in the structure with a threefold sequence to give feedback, it's very powerful. And if you know this alone can improve your collaboration already a lot. So I think there's a lot of details in these things. What was kind of not so known to me and a very positive thing is the why, which stands for yes and. And yes and is a very proven technique from improv. So when you're sharing an idea in a collaborative session, you want to get feedback, and you also want that your idea is somehow considered, at least for a moment, and it's not just wiped away to say, well, that's nonsense. We've tried it in the past, and all these killing phrases that we know. And this improv technique to say, yes, I take your idea, and maybe just take a tiny fraction that's not completely nonsense and build on top of this and say, yes, I like this piece. And what if we could extend it to the next one, like Lego bricks that are put on top of one another. And that's really a good idea, because as soon as you say, yes, but, it means, well, your idea is nice try, Lisette, but really you should do your homework. You know what, we've tried it, or it never works out, or research has shown it's not going to work out. But if you say yes, and it's positive, I acknowledged your contribution. I said, well, that's at least this little aspect is fantastic. And now we build upon on top of it. And so that was kind of one of the letters and the categories that were kind of new to me. Again, two small words that can make a big difference.
I love it because what you're doing here is we're basically increasing uh, the concepts and the techniques that we have in our toolboxes for various situations, right? Like just knowing a little bit from the liberating structures community, a little bit from the clean language community, a little bit from the improv community, like having all of those different tool sets just sort of helps us be better, well, online collaborators, but I'd say also better facilitators for meetings, better interviewers. I've even used some of these tricks at parties back when we were allowed to go to parties, in terms of just trying to really like the clean language when you use what kind of X, and is there anything else about X to dive deeper into somebody's subject. And I've done that, and it's kind of a surprise. It has a surprising effect. So it's not just for work. You can use them at parties too.
Yep.
When we start to go back to parties. I'm just like in conversation, being a better conversationalist in some ways.
Yep.
It can help us. So I love that it increases our toolbox, which brings us to a good segue to iObeya. Speaking of tools, iObeya is a digital visual management platform, and sounds complicated, those words, but I want you to go into it because I think that this is the kind of thing, this visual management and this concept of visual management is increasingly more and more important as we're working remotely and with distributed teams, because as we know, visualizing our work helps us collaborate better together. It gives us sort of a one source of truth to always come back to. And when we're working across cultures and languages, pictures are, or at least the visualizations of ideas, are incredibly powerful, much more so than just words, right? If you're going to just tell somebody what your vacation spot looked like, that's one thing. But if you show them a picture of where you were, that says so much more than you could possibly describe. So clearly visualization is really important. So talk to us. What is iObeya in your words?
Before I come to this, just as you said, visualization is very important. And in the context of collaboration and teamwork, the concept of a sticky note is pretty amazing. I mean, sticky notes were invented by chance. So when 3M wanted to invent a very strong glue, they invented sticky notes. It was a very weak glue. And this really changed the world in a way, because suddenly what you can do is to put snippets of ideas onto a little sheet of paper, and then you can put it together, you can cluster it, you can structure it, you can sort it, you can do all kinds of things on a wall. So suddenly you can not only visualize your thoughts like on a whiteboard, but you can move them around and combine them, again, similar to Lego bricks. And it's a very, very powerful tool. And that's why now in every agency and even every Scrum team and wherever you go, where people work together, you see these sticky notes because they're so powerful and have really unlocked an amazing potential. Exactly.
Yeah, I've got a stack next to me, a wall full.
Yeah. So I mean, that's really fascinating. In this collaboration ABC, as a little promotion here, there's also a great TED talk linked and on sticky notes. So that's kind of the background. So I always loved sticky notes as a concept. I actually worked for 3M in the past in a different area, but over the last 13 months or so during the pandemic, a lot of companies have explored, and teams or had to explore digital tools for virtual whiteboards or digital sticky notes. And there are a lot of tools on the market, and it's all of the tools are better than having no tools when it comes to collaboration. So it was a big push in this area, which is great. And it helped a lot of teams to also put more creative processes and complex problem solving into the virtual space, which typically was limited to a physical space. iObeya is around for 10 years, and just from the word, it's obeya as a term is a Japanese word for big room. And it was actually a concept that was developed by Toyota in the 70s when they were developing the Prius, a very successful car, the first hybrid car in this area. And they were 50% or 100% faster than all of the competition globally, including German car manufacturers. So And if you would ask Toyota, they would say that one of the big success factors was this big room, and the big room was full of visuals. So of visual tools like sticky notes, but charts and printouts, and they even had a prototype of the Toyota Prius in the room. It is not just about this visibility that you have that shows your complete project at a glance, from vision and strategy to your backlog that you have to do, and to your performance management and to the issues that you need to solve. But it's also about the rituals that you have. So it was the place where management and the operational teams were meeting on a regular basis to really look at the project and define what needs to be done, what needs to be changed, what needs to be solved, and then assign it to the different people. It was a huge success. So a very structured way, a very visual way to collaboration. And this is what iObeya was bringing into the digital world. So they actually were working for a large customer, PSA Group. So it's a automotive group where you have brands like Peugeot and Citroën. And they had a lot of these big rooms, physical big rooms, with all the challenges attached, that you can't have hybrid meetings and that sticky notes fall off the wall and all these challenges, hard to scale. And iObeya digitized this. So it always had this room, this virtual room as its core, and also had a lot of requirements from an enterprise grade customer in terms of avoiding redundancies. So what you don't want to have is the same element of information, the same data set 10 different times on 10 different virtual sticky notes. So the system is very good in mapping the production system that a company has, whether it's a production system like the Toyota production system. Sometimes it's called operating system, large organizations, but you typically have a network of teams on different levels that share information. You have workflows between the teams. You have KPI trees that are consolidated on a pyramid. And iObeya is doing the whiteboarding and the sticky notes, but mapped to the production system in the background. So you can map out this network of teams. You can map out these workflows, and also you avoid the redundancies. I mean, a lot of people have had this experience. As soon as you start with these virtual whiteboards, it is fantastic. If you've never used one and you have unlimited space and you have all kinds of little islands of sticky notes where you can cluster stuff. And it's perfect for this kind of fuzzy front end of innovation where you just want to put all ideas on a table and then work on this. For the majority of use cases where you really say, well, now let's use it on a day-to-day basis. And you mentioned visualizing work on a Kanban board, on a Scrum task board, or having other having other visual content that is used in recurring meetings. You need a more structured approach, because otherwise you get completely lost. As a single person, as a private person, you quickly come to tens or hundreds of virtual whiteboards if you don't have a very disciplined way to manage it. But think about a company with 10,000 or 100,000 employees. It quickly becomes unmanageable. And that's really where iObeya has an enterprise system to manage this complexity in a very structured way, and also have all these security measures like on-premise deployment, etc., that these large customers need.
Right, because I can imagine you wouldn't want your competitor to be able to just come into your big room. Like Toyota probably had some serious security precautions in front of their big room, like for people to come in and see what their processes were and stuff. So yeah,
I mean, all the ideas, all the great concepts for the future that typically start on these boards, right? To put them in a public cloud is yes, you can do it, but a lot of large companies have a concern around this. So
yeah, and rightfully so. Rightfully so. I mean, there's there's a lot of security needs, important security needs out there, right? In terms of innovation and competition. So I love it. Also, what I like about this iObeya system is that it gives you like a one source of truth to always be tapping into. So you always know how everything fits in with each other. There's not hundreds of whiteboards lying around that you have to filter through, like where did the idea come from? How did it get from there to our Trello or Teams or whatever it is that you're using to track, so I like that there's like one source of truth that captures all the moving parts. Because indeed, I mean, I create tons of whiteboards and then you just like archive them, like hundreds of archived whiteboards. Yeah.
And which is easy if you do it yourself or you are the facilitator. But if you're really in a team setting in a company,
Oh,
can I
yeah.
archive it, or is someone still working on it? Do I need to check with all these people? So it quickly gets unmanageable if you don't have either a system that really supports you, or you're super disciplined and your team leader always says, well, okay, let's review what we've created. And it's not trivial. So I think it's a good way to think about how to structure this and how to work with this data. And this idea of having a single source of truth that you said is really important, because the least you want as an IT company or as a company as such is to duplicate information. So we have a very deep integration with Jira, for example. So if Jira is your issue management system or task management system, you have this as your leading source, as your leading database, and you can visualize it on the iObeya boards.
Brilliant, brilliant. So sadly, we're coming to the end of our time today, and but I have so many more questions. I've got all these notes I've been taking. But just a couple more questions then. I would just say, if you were going to give people advice in terms of where to start learning about online collaboration or just collaboration in general, you are clearly you're going to point them to the website, but like, how would you advise somebody to start?
I mean, honestly, I would have been very happy 10 years ago if I would have had such website that covers all the different aspects, and then you can go deep. So you have a lot of book recommendations. Maybe the one book that is really good and it's relatively new, and I am just about to finish right now, is Culture Code. And it talks about the different, it picked out, I think, 8 different teams from Navy SEALs to various other different disciplines, and really carved out the essence of effective teamwork. And so I think reading at least one of those books as a whole, and then maybe explore a lot of these resources. There are fantastic TED Talks about things like personal effectiveness, but also about psychological safety, which is, according to research, one of the most important requirements for effective teamwork. So I think that's where I would start to look into this.
Great advice. Great advice. And then the last question, an easy one, which is, if people want to learn more about you, where is the best place to find you online?
So I'm on LinkedIn. I'm very happy to connect even with strangers, and then also on curationabc.com. You find my email address. So very happy to connect and discuss. So I'm always looking for further resources that I can attach to my letters, or even people that challenge the letters and say, well, this should be a different category. You should revamp it completely. Yeah, very happy to collaborate on this as well.
Happy, or be careful what you wish for. You never know. There's a collaboration nut out there ready to challenge you. So great. I'll definitely link to all of these in the show notes, so that makes it easier for listeners to find the information. Tobias, thank you so much for being here today and for sharing your story. I really appreciate it.
It was a pleasure. Thanks so much.
All right. And until next time, everybody, be powerful.